What are the most meaningful lessons that you've learned over the past 30 years from studying perpetrators?
Most importantly, that I believe the perpetrators are ordinary people. There are few exceptions, the predators, the very sadistic ones, the deranged ones. But that is a very small minority. Most perpetrators are ordinary people, so that is lesson number one. Lesson number two is that almost everyone can become a perpetrator, and that you transform into being a perpetrator. Me saying that all of us can become perpetrators doesn't mean that you and me right now would do just any horrendous act. No, right now we are in a context where we wouldn't do that. But if this context changes and we are put in a very different context, a situation of a very strongly polarized society, a war, if we put us in the conflict of Israel-Hamas, that could change, and then we could transform. And I do believe it's a transformation process that you actually really change. When you start to commit violence, then what I've learned is that almost each and every perpetrator feels horrible about that. So they feel bad about what they did. They're shocked. They thought they do the right thing, and then suddenly they're confronted with the victim. And almost all of them feel horribly bad about that. But then, and that's lesson number 3, I guess, we human beings find it very hard to acknowledge that we did something wrong. So what do we prefer? To rationalize and justify what we do. And we can go to such long and extreme length to rationalize and justify extreme behavior. And one of the most striking examples I had in the book, which comes from Christopher Browning's Police Battalion 101, there was one perpetrator who said, "Yeah, but I only killed kids." And you're like, you only killed kids. Aren't those people the worst? But then he explains. He said, no, because my neighbor killed the mother. And then I reasoned with myself, the kid cannot live without the mother. So I killed the kid. And in his mind, he therefore transformed murder and genocide into some kind of mercy killing because there wasn't a life for the kid. And that, I do believe, is also a very important lesson to realize how we can trick ourselves in doing something really wrong and yet convincing ourselves that's the right thing. So the main lesson for me is to always continuously critically reflect on what you're doing. Not in a way that your entire behavior is hampered, but always take a step back and think like, am I doing the right thing? Am I not in one of those? I remember you said at the beginning of the podcast, when you put someone on a train in a certain direction with Eichmann, that you go into that direction and always realize like, look, pause, which train am I on? Which direction am I heading into? And that you always need to do that. So these, I would say, are the most important lessons from research on perpetrators in general. The one more specifically from the book is the fact that there are still many different perpetrators and the way they interact. Sometimes I'm struck with, in my past career, I sometimes met scholars who heard me talk about the typology. And they say, oh, you've got it all wrong. They're all criminals. And then it turned out they did research where they indeed investigated a criminal group, a criminal gang that played a role in a certain war. And then I say, yeah, okay, your group are indeed all criminals. And then someone else studied bureaucrats and said, oh, they're all driven by obedience. Yes, that group, yes. But and I hope that's the added value of my book, that you have the overall more helicopter view and say, yeah, we have the followers, we have the deranged, we have the criminals, we have the profiteers, the careerists, and all these different types and how they interact and interrelate.